Blood. That's what sticks with me most from that night. Just a single drop on the bathroom marble from Clara's lip. 63 messages, 2 hours. Arthur Vance was tearing my Clara apart, exposing her work as garbage to the entire firm. Her hands shook, her voice a raw whisper. He needs these projections in an hour. His email subject line read, inadequate. The blood on the marble was a bright spot against the gray vein, no bigger than a pinhead. Clara stood at bent over the sink, shoulders shaking, not quite crying. He needs these projections in an hour, she whispered, her voice rough, barely audible over the hum of the bathroom fan. He says my analysis is garbage. Absolutely garbage. Her phone, vibrating on the counter beside her toothbrush, lit up with another notification. 63 messages in 2 hours, all from Arthur Vance. The man was tearing her apart, systematically, publicly. I could see the glow of his words from the living room, even through the thin bathroom door. He'd CC'd half her department, demanding a complete overhaul of her biotech models, citing fundamental flaws. My hands clenched, the remote control suddenly insignificant. That's when I knew. Arthur Vance had to be destroyed. Not just beaten, not just exposed. Destroyed. The thought was cold, sharp, and settled deep in my gut like a stone. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about protection, about making sure no one could ever make her feel this small again. Weeks later, the memory of that night still lingered, a low thrum beneath the surface of things. Clara, however, seemed to have forgotten it entirely, or at least compartmentalized it, a skill I admired and sometimes resented. She burst through the front door one Tuesday evening, bouncing on the balls of her feet, an off-white envelope clutched in her hand like a winning lottery ticket. Paul, you won't believe it. Leave. Her voice was higher pitched than usual, a clear sign of unrestrained joy. Arthur Vance wants me at Vance Capital. I pushed my chair back from the desk in my home office, the lines of code on my monitor momentarily blurring. Did someone finally recognize your genius, hun? I tried to keep my tone light, but a flicker of the earlier coldness touched me. Vance, the name tasted like ash. She didn't notice. He called me personally, Paul, said my biotech analysis was brilliantly predictive, said he'd been following my work for months. Wants to mentor me, Paul, personally. Her eyes were wide, shining with an almost childlike wonder. She practically skipped over to me, holding out the heavy vellum envelope. I took it, the paper surprisingly cool against my fingertips. Triple your current salary, I read. A dedicated team to build out your models. A corner office with a river view. I scrolled through the pages, scanning the figures, the impressive clauses. Clara, this can't be real. It felt too good, too sudden, coming from the same man who'd reduced her to a trembling mess. It is. Her voice trembled slightly, a raw edge of ambition. This is what I've worked for. My shot at the big leagues. This is everything. She pulled me up from my chair, her grip surprisingly strong. Her eyes were feverish, reflecting the overhead light. She bit her lip then, a slight pause in her whirlwind of excitement. He invited us to dinner tomorrow. His penthouse. Wants to meet you, says family stability is crucial for his key people. For my focus. She said the last part with a slight roll of her eyes, but the underlying earnestness was clear. I should have seen it then, the first red flag waving slow and deliberate in the periphery. A man who tore someone down so brutally, then offered them the moon, and insisted on meeting their spouse to ensure stability. But I just said, not weird, thorough. That's what I told myself anyway. He was just a meticulous Wall Street type. The penthouse was all glass and sharp angles overlooking the city's grid. Arthur Vance met us at the door. He was tall, patrician, with hair that looked sculpted rather than merely styled. His pale blue eyes were clear, almost unnervingly so. Clara, welcome. His gaze shifted to me, a momentary blankness. This must be the husband, Jacob, the software developer. Engineer, actually, I corrected, my hand already extended. Just Paul. His handshake was firm, dry, precise, like a good measurement. He smiled then, a small, practiced gesture that didn't quite reach his eyes. So you protect the money while Clara grows it. A symbiotic partnership. He gestured us towards the living room, a vast space dominated by an abstract sculpture and the glittering city below. The phrase "protect the money" hung in the air, a subtle dismissal. Later, over small plates of artisanal food, he raised his crystal glass to Clara, ignoring me for the moment. "To our partnership," he declared, his voice smooth, resonant. "I will remake you into something magnificent." His eyes, those pale blue eyes, held a peculiar glint, like a predator sizing up its quarry. "I will remake you into something magnificent." The words echoed in my head, a proprietary language that settled heavily. Not "we will accomplish" or "we will grow together." Just "I will remake you." It should have screamed at me then, a blaring alarm bell, but I dismissed it as corporate jargon, the pompous phrasing of a man used to wielding power. Clara, however, seemed oblivious. Over a late dinner of takeout pho, she picked at her noodles, exhausted but utterly exhilarated. Her eyes, usually so focused and sharp, held a dreamy, almost reverent quality. "Arthur is a genius, Paul. The way he sees market patterns, it's supernatural. He can predict shifts before anyone else even registers them. He's building something truly revolutionary." She spoke of him like a prophet, her mentor, her personal god of finance. I was happy for her, genuinely, to see her so engaged, so passionate. This was what she'd always dreamed of. But those hours, she'd leave the house at 5:30 a.m., sometimes before I was even out of bed, a quick kiss on my forehead as I feigned sleep. She wouldn't be back until after 9 p.m., often later. Always exhausted, always with that distant, driven look in her eyes. Our shared dinners became a rarity, replaced by me eating alone at the kitchen counter, listening to the silence. One Friday evening, a week before the opera, the phone rang. It was Clara. Her voice was tight, thin, stretched taut. "I can't make the opera tonight, Paul." A sigh, heavy with resignation. "Arthur needs me to restructure a prospectus. It's critical, apparently, for a client meeting first thing Monday." "Can't someone else handle it?" I asked, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. We'd had those tickets for months, orchestra seats. It was a new production of La Traviata, featuring her favorite soprano. "You've been looking forward to this." "He wants me specifically," she said, her voice dropping. "Says only I understand his vision for this. And he really needs it tonight." I'm sorry, Paul, truly." "It's fine," I said, the words feeling hollow as they left my mouth. "There'll be other performances." I tried to believe it, but there weren't. That canceled date was just the first. An avalanche of broken plans, missed anniversaries, forgotten birthdays. Our weekly walks by the lake disappeared. Our Sunday morning coffee ritual evaporated. My steady, reliable Clara, the woman who meticulously planned everything from vacations to grocery lists, was now a ghost. Always there, but never quite present. By month 3, Clara was changing in more profound ways. Not just her schedule, but her very being. She'd lost too much weight, a gauntness beginning to cling to her cheekbones, shadowing her eyes. Her clothes, once tailored and crisp, now just hung on her, hinting at the smaller frame beneath. Her vibrant auburn hair, once cascading down her back, now pulled back in a severe, almost harsh bun. The casual elegance was gone, replaced by a stark, almost unapproachable professionalism. She looked like a different woman, one I barely recognized. I'd watch her sometimes, across the table as she stared blankly at her lukewarm coffee, or as she packed her briefcase, moving with a weary precision. The sparkle, that bright, curious spark that had first drawn me to her, was gone from her eyes, replaced by a permanent shadow, a deep-seated weariness that no amount of sleep seemed to alleviate. She looked haunted. One Saturday morning, as I watched her mechanically butter a piece of toast, she caught my gaze. Her head snapped up, her expression suddenly sharp, defensive. "Why are you looking at me like that, Paul? I'm just tired." "You don't eat, you don't sleep, you barely talk," I said, my voice low, trying to bridge the growing distance between us. "You're disappearing, Clara, right in front of me." She slammed her butter knife down on the plate, the ceramic clattering sharply. "This is what success looks like, Paul." Her voice rose, edged with a bitterness I hadn't heard before. "It's demanding. It's not some 9 to 5 engineering job where you can just clock out and forget about it. You wouldn't understand." She was right, I didn't understand. Not yet. But a cold knot of dread was tightening in my gut, a slow, insidious fear that whispered she might be right, that I truly didn't understand what she was becoming. The slow poison worked its way into our routine, changing the texture of our days. The phone calls started happening behind closed doors, her voice a low murmur I couldn't quite decipher. Late-night texts, followed by the quick, almost imperceptible deletion of messages. I'd sometimes catch a glimpse of her thumb swiping, clearing the screen before she laid the phone down. Her laptop screen was always angled away from me now, a deliberate barrier. The glow from it often kept her up late into the night, long after I'd given up on sleep. She'd even put a new password on it, a string of characters I didn't recognize, and she wouldn't share it. When I asked, trying to keep my voice light, she'd simply say, "Work stuff. Confidential." "You used to tell me everything about your work, hun," I ventured one morning over cold coffee. "The algorithms, the market trends, the absurd office politics. What changed?" She stirred her coffee, her gaze fixed on the swirling cream. "Nothing's changed, Paul. It's just proprietary. Vance Capital is very strict about information sharing, more so than you're used to at your firm." Her tone was defensive, a subtle wall going up between us. And then there was the smell, not just the expensive perfumes, though she'd taken to wearing a heavier, more complex scent. This was different, a deeper, almost chemical scent that I couldn't place. It clung to her hair, her clothes, a sharp tang that spoke of late nights and stale office air, but also something else, something metallic and unsettling. One afternoon, Betty, our housekeeper, held up a small, ornate silver tie clip, delicately etched with a Celtic knot design. She found it on the bathroom counter, a place Clara usually kept meticulously clear. "Mr. Paul, Mrs. Clara, she leave this on the counter again. Not like her." Betty's brow was furrowed with concern. She'd been with us for years, a quiet observer of our lives. I took the tie clip, the cold metal heavy in my palm. The design was intricate, expensive. A knot tightened in my stomach. "That's not mine." I remembered Arthur Vance that night at his penthouse, the glint of something similar on his silk tie. Arthur Vance wore one just like it that night we met. Just then, Clara rushed in, her briefcase still in her hand, her eyes immediately fixated on the tie clip. "Betty, why are you touching my things?" She snatched the clip from my hand, her movements sharp, agitated. "Paul, this is nothing, just a client gift. A thank you from some big investor." Her face was flushed, her eyes darted away, voiding mine. A client gift? For her? Or from him? The explanation felt flimsy, a hastily constructed excuse. Investors sent gifts to the firm, not individual tie clips to a junior analyst. The image of Arthur Vance's cold, precise handshake flashed in my mind. Lying awake next to her in the dark, the silence of the room was punctuated by the distant hum of city traffic. She'd murmur his name in her sleep sometimes. "Arthur." "No." A faint whisper, a desperate plea that broke through her subconscious defenses. Her dreams were restless, filled with unspoken anxieties. She'd toss and turn, her breathing shallow and uneven. She was caught, trapped in some invisible web, and I felt the sticky strands of it tightening around her. I started noticing the little things that, individually, meant nothing, but together, painted a disturbing picture. The way she'd subtly avoid my touch, even a casual brush of hands. The distance in her gaze, as if she were always looking past me, at something far away, something only she could see. The casual disregard for our shared life, for the plans we once made. Then one evening she announced it, her voice flat, almost bored, as if she were discussing the weather. She was checking her phone as she spoke, not looking at me. "Arthur says he's taking me on a business trip next month, to Geneva. It's crucial." My blood ran cold. "Geneva? For how long? And just you two?" The words came out sharper than I intended, an accusation in their tone. She finally looked up, her expression one of pure annoyance. "It's just business, Paul. You're being paranoid. We're discussing a major merger opportunity. It's a huge deal for the firm, and he needs my input personally." She dismissed my concerns with a wave of her hand. the same hand that once intertwined with mine so naturally. Now it just pushed me away. The truth wasn't a sudden crack, a sharp, defining break. It was a slow, agonizing splintering, piece by agonizing piece, like a foundation crumbling under a relentless, unseen force. Each whisper, each deleted text, each evasive glance was a tiny fracture, weakening the structure of my life with Clara. After another sleepless night, the air thick with unspoken tension, I knew I had to see for myself. The suspicion, the gnawing dread, had become unbearable. My engineering mind, trained to seek data and verify facts, demanded proof. I called in sick, a rare occurrence, and waited. When Clara left for work, I waited another 15 minutes, then pulled out of the driveway, following the route I knew she took. I kept a careful distance, just enough to see her silver sedan ahead without being obvious. She drove directly to Vance Capital, parked in her usual spot. I watched her walk in, then circled the block, settling into a parking spot a little further down the street, obscured by a delivery truck. After half an hour of watching the main entrance, she emerged. Not with a team, not with a colleague, but with Arthur Vance. His tall, lean frame was unmistakable. As they walked towards a sleek black car, his hand rested casually, intimately on her lower back. A gesture that, even from this distance, spoke volumes. They drove a few blocks, pulling up to a Michelin-starred Italian restaurant. I parked across the street, the engine off, the windows fogging slightly with my breath. Through the elegant glass facade, I saw them seated at a corner table. Arthur Vance leaned in close, whispered something I couldn't hear, but the effect was immediate. Clara laughed, a genuine, uninhibited laugh, clear and bright, a sound I hadn't heard from her in months, the kind of laugh that used to fill our home, now reserved for him. Then he kissed her, right there in the window of a fancy Manhattan restaurant, visible to anyone walking by. It wasn't a quick peck. It was lingering, possessive. Her head tilted, her hand briefly resting on his arm. No doubt, no question. The truth, stark and brutal, crystallized in that single, agonizing image. I drove home numbly, the city outside blurring into a gray smear. The world went quiet, as if someone had turned off the volume. Everything I'd suspected, everything I'd feared, laid bare. It wasn't just a betrayal of vows, it was a betrayal of the woman I knew, of the life we'd built, of the trust I had placed in Huron. The cold stone in my gut turned to ice. She came home late that night, her footsteps on the stairs unusually quiet. I was waiting in the living room, the single lamp casting long shadows. She stopped short when she saw me, her expression unreadable. "I saw you, Clara," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion, a cold hard fact. "With Arthur Vance. Tonight, at Lombardi's." Her face drained of color, then hardened, a flash of defiance replacing the shock. "You followed me? How could you, Paul? That's an invasion of privacy. It's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think," I countered, rising slowly, my gaze unwavering. "It's what I've watched happen for months. The late nights, the canceled dates, the secrecy. He's consumed you, Clara. He's taken every piece of you and twisted it until you're unrecognizable." Her voice shook, but beneath it was a strange intensity, a fervor I hadn't seen directed at me in a long time. "You don't understand, Paul. He sees me. He understands my potential. He believes in me in a way you never could. He's pushing me, challenging me, making me into the person I was always meant to be." She was gone. The vibrant, effervescent Clara I married, the woman who debated market trends with me over breakfast, who loved our quiet evenings, was replaced by a shell, a puppet on Arthur's strings. He hadn't just taken her body, he'd taken her mind, her ambition, her very identity. "Please, Paul," she said, her voice dropping to a desperate plea, "don't ruin this. My career, everything I've worked for." "It's already ruined, Clara," I stated, the words like chips of ice. "He ruined it. He ruined you. And he's going to pay for it." My resolve, once a quiet hum of anger, solidified into something absolute, unyielding. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and felt a burning behind my eyes, a surprising warmth in the vast coldness within me. Tears, real tears. "I'm not doing this for revenge, Clara," I said, the words catching in my throat. I'm doing it to get you back, or at least what's left of you. Revenge isn't a sprint, not a sudden outburst of violence. It's a marathon, a long, grueling test of endurance, and I had to start training. First, I needed to learn about Arthur Vance, peel back the layers of the man who wore designer suits and orchestrated illicit affairs. I needed to understand his vulnerabilities, his patterns, the very fabric of his carefully constructed life. Night after night, long after Clara had retreated to her own silence, I sat at my desk, my screen glowed, illuminating the stacks of takeout containers and half-empty coffee mugs. I dug into Arthur Vance's past, a meticulous archaeological excavation, public records, obscure news articles from regional papers, old financial filings tucked away in online archives. There were bankruptcies, a few messy lawsuits quietly settled, a pattern of shell corporations appearing and disappearing with the tides of the market. He built his empire fast, too fast, always on the edge, always exploiting loopholes, always a step ahead of the regulators, a financial phantom. I eventually called Mark, an old friend from my university days, a man who could untangle any digital knot. He'd built a reputation as one of the best ethical hackers in the country, a man who could find a ghost in a machine. "Mark," I said, my voice low, tired, "I need a favor. Heavy-duty digital forensics, ghost-level stuff." A pause stretched on the line, the static a faint crackle. "Paul, that sounds like trouble," Mark said, his tone cautious, knowing. "What are we talking about here? Your firm having a security breach?" "We're talking about a man who's destroying a good woman," I replied, the words precise, unburdened by emotion. "And I aim to stop him, permanently." Mark didn't press for details, not yet. He knew me well enough to know when I was beyond casual conversation. He just said, "Send me what you have. I'll take a look." Arthur Vance thrived on control. He isolated Clara, made her dependent, eroding her confidence until she saw him as her sole champion. That was his method, his modus operandi. I saw it clearly now, the slow, insidious process that had devoured my wife. I looked at Vance Capital's performance reports, available through public channels. His funds returns were legendary, almost mythical in their consistency. But some of those numbers, those improbable year-after-year gains, looked too perfect. My research deepened. I started uncovering hidden connections, a labyrinth of shell companies registered in Delaware and the Cayman Islands, offshore accounts stretching across the globe, a network of complicit individuals, minor players who popped up in various corporate filings, then vanished. He had layers like an onion, each one designed to obscure the core. His entire reputation, his mystique, rested on his brilliant predictions. That was the cornerstone of his empire, the story he spun to investors. What if those predictions weren't so brilliant? What if they were manufactured, manipulated? That was his key vulnerability, his Achilles' heel. I needed a lever, something that would not just expose him for the predatory man he was, but unravel his entire house of cards, destroy his financial standing, his name, his carefully crafted persona. "I need everything you can find on Vance Capital's proprietary trading algorithms," I told Mark during our next call, my voice tight with a cold resolve. "Every line of code, every backdoor, every obscure data stream." Mark whistled softly. "That's a tall order, Paul. He's got the best security money can buy. Firewalls, encrypted servers, biometric access. They run a tight ship." "Good," I said, a grim satisfaction in my voice. "Because I designed some of those systems. Not Vance's specifically, but the underlying architecture, the theoretical frameworks they're all built upon. I know their weaknesses." There was a quiet confidence in that statement, born of years spent in the trenches of cybersecurity. This wasn't just about Arthur. It was about Clara, about protecting the remnants of our life, about reclaiming what he had stolen, even if she couldn't see it yet. This was about justice, a brutal, Midwestern kind of justice. If you're finding yourself invested in Paul's methodical quest for justice, stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. The first shot was fired subtly, anonymously. A leak, a whisper in the right ear, A precisely crafted snippet of code sent to a financial blogger known for his deep dives into Wall Street's underbelly. It wasn't enough to cause an earthquake, just a tremor. A few days later, a news headline flashed across the TV screen in our living room while Clara was packing for work. Vance Capital under scrutiny? Whistleblower hints at algorithm irregularities. Clara froze, her hand halfway to her coffee cup. My phone, which I'd left strategically on the kitchen counter, vibrated. It was Mark. "The bait's taken," he whispered, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. "The SEC is already making quiet inquiries." Later that morning, as I worked from my home office, I overheard Clara on the phone. Arthur Vance's voice, though muffled, was unmistakable, laced with a furious edge. "What do you mean, hints? Find the source. Shut it down. This is a direct attack." He sounded like a cornered animal. Clara came into my office looking pale, her usually steady hands fidgeting with a pen. "Arthur seems agitated," she said, her brow furrowed. "The market's reacting badly to some rumors. His algorithms are performing unpredictably." I looked up from my code, meeting her eyes calmly. "Rumors have a way of becoming facts when there's truth to them, Clara." My voice was even, betraying nothing. The words were a quiet warning, a seed I hoped would finally take root. "Phase 2, I told Mark later that afternoon. My instructions were clear, precise, like surgical strikes. Target his market predictions. Show how they're not genius, but manipulation. Plant the breadcrumbs, let them find the trail." Mark reported back within days. "It's working, Paul. We've got clear evidence now. His algorithms have subtle backdoors that allowed him to front-run certain trades. Small amounts initially, but over time, it's generated massive illicit profits. It's a classic setup." And the thrill of the hunt, cold and calculating, surged through me. The financial news channels were buzzing. A talking head, a slick-haired analyst I sometimes saw on CNBC, spoke gravely into the camera. "The Oracle of Wall Street seems to be losing his touch. Several recent calls proved disastrous. His much-touted biotech fund is down nearly 20% in a week. Investors are bailing." Clara came home one night, tearful, exhausted, her eyes red-rimmed. She practically collapsed onto the couch. "He's making me work all night again, Paul. Every night. He says I'm the only one who can fix this mess. The only one who understands the models now. He's screaming at everyone else." She barely looked at me, her gaze distant, fixed on some internal horror. He was isolating her further, pulling her deeper into his collapsing world, making her complicit, dependent, just as I planned. It was a cruel irony, but a necessary one. He'd done the same thing to her at the beginning, but with praise instead of panic. I sent another anonymous tip. This one wasn't subtle. This one was a full data dump, carefully curated, undeniable proof. "Now the insider trading," I whispered to the empty room. "The evidence is irrefutable." The next morning, the dam broke. My phone buzzed with an urgent news alert. "Vance Capital faces SEC investigation. Allegations of widespread insider trading." The headline was bold, damning. It was done. Hours later, Clara burst through the front door. Her hair was disheveled, her suit jacket askew, her face streaked with tears and dirt. Her eyes were wild, distraught. "It's over, Paul," she sobbed, collapsing against the doorframe. "Everything. Arthur's assets are frozen. The SEC is there. He's being arrested." She stood there, panting, completely broken. Then she looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in what felt like forever. A flicker of suspicion, a spark of dawning realization touched her eyes, cutting through the haze of her grief. "How did you know?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You seem so calm." The house of cards was falling, piece by bloody piece, and Clara was finally looking at me, really looking, for the first time in a long time. Arthur Vance went down hard. The news cycles were relentless, filled with charges of fraud, market manipulation, and widespread insider trading. His empire, once thought impregnable, shattered into a million pieces. The SEC and federal prosecutors moved swiftly, meticulously, building a case that was airtight, thanks to the careful anonymous leaks. I watched it unfold on the news, a quiet satisfaction settling over me. cool and steady. Clara, however, was not watching. She sat across from me in the living room, a blanket wrapped around her, her eyes hollow, fixed on nothing. The frantic energy that had consumed her for months was gone, replaced by a profound emptiness. "He used me, Paul," she whispered, her voice raw, barely audible. "He used my analysis, my work, to cover his tracks, to make his manipulations look like genius. He manipulated me from the start, made me think I was indispensable." I reached across the coffee table, resting my hand gently on her arm. "I know, Clara," I said, my voice low. "I told you he was destroying you. He consumed you alive, piece by piece." Her head dropped, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The affair, it was just another way for him to control me, to keep me quiet, to keep me dependent. He made me feel like I owed him, like I couldn't survive without him. The confession hung in the air, heavy with shame and pain. It wasn't an excuse, but an explanation, a glimpse into the labyrinth of manipulation she'd been trapped in. I moved closer, pulling her into my arms, holding her as she finally broke down completely. Her body was frail against mine, trembling with the weight of it all. "It wasn't your fault, hun," I murmured into her hair, stroking her back. "He's a monster, a predator. He saw a light in you and he wanted to put it out, or reshape it for his own use." After a long time, she pulled back, her face tear-streaked, but with a flicker of something in her eyes, a spark of the old Clara beginning to return. "But how?" she asked, her voice raspy. "How did all this happen so fast? All those rumors, the investigations. Who did this?" Her gaze met mine, suddenly sharp, full of a dawning, terrible understanding. "I did, Clara," I said, meeting her gaze steadily. The truth, stark and unadorned. "I tore him down, piece by bloody piece." Her eyes widened, shock warring with a strange, dawning understanding. You went to war for me?" she whispered, almost reverently. "You're my wife, Clara," I stated, the words simple, firm. "And nobody gets to dismantle my wife, not while I'm breathing." The cleanup was long, messy, and painful. Clara had to testify, her professional reputation tarnished. But she was free. Free from Arthur, free from the web of deceit, free to breathe again. Her career at Vance Capital was naturally over. The industry, even for a victim, was unforgiving. It was a slow climb back. Years of healing, rebuilding trust, finding herself again, away from the glittering, poisonous allure of Wall Street. She took a less demanding role at a biotech startup, focusing on the science she loved, away from the high-stakes manipulation. Slowly, painstakingly, the sparkle returned to her eyes, the color to her cheeks. She started laughing again, a genuine, unburdened sound that filled our quiet home. We went for walks by the lake again, slowly piecing together the broken fragments of our shared life. Years later, over coffee on a Sunday morning, the sunlight streaming into our kitchen, Clara looked at me, a soft smile playing on her lips. "Remember that night, Paul? The blood on the marble? The opera tickets? You saved me, you really did." I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine, our fingers intertwining, a familiar comfort. "We saved us, Clara," I corrected gently. "Together." The scars remained. On Clara, a lingering wariness, a wisdom born of fire. On me, a cold resolve that sometimes still surprised me, a reminder of the darkness I had embraced. On our family, a quiet understanding of what we had endured. But we learned the price of ambition, the cost of betrayal, and the strength of a bond that, though tested, refused to break. It ain't a happy ending, not like in the movies. No grand pronouncements, no swelling music. But it's an honest one. And sometimes, for folks like us, living in the quiet real world, that's enough. After the dust settled, Arthur Vance's name became synonymous with disgrace. The financial news, once his pedestal, now served as his gallows, detailing his spectacular fall from grace. Clara faced the music, testifying with a quiet resolve that had been missing for too long. Her career, as she knew it, was a casualty. But she was free, disentangled from his toxic grip, a quiet victory in a public humiliation. The healing was a long road. We started slow, rebuilding our routine. One shared dinner, one quiet evening by the lake at a time. The silence between us, once heavy with unspoken accusation, softened into something comfortable, understanding. She found a new job, a smaller firm, a chance to rediscover her passion for biotech without the shadow of a tyrant. The scars remained, etched into us both. A lingering wariness in Clara's eyes, a hardness in my own that surfaced sometimes when I thought of the lengths I'd gone to. We had learned the true cost of ambition, the insidious nature of betrayal, and the almost terrifying lengths one might go to protect what little remains. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, no Hollywood fanfare or swelling music, just a slow, honest reclamation of a life nearly lost. And for folks like us, in the quiet suburbs, that was enough.